And I will turn it over to Judy and her.
I just got a direct
Chris,
chat
who will
from the
be
treasurer.
running.
Welcome. I assume that means that he accepted that thing, but I wrote him a private message.
Don't know what it was about. Don't have to worry about what that was about, do I?
No.
Admit that. So she just to let you know, because we might have a slight lag occasionally. Judy has a friend named Chris Woodsign who's helping her with the presentation. It's actually running on Chris's computer. So we're going to, this is the first time I've done a dual meeting like this. I don't think there'll be any problems, but just in case, please bear with us. And now I will turn it over to Judy.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you to the Jewish Genealogical Society of Portland for inviting me to do this. I'm just thrilled to do it because it's just who I am. I've been doing this for so long and so fascinated with it. And I want to thank my able assistants, Chris Woodside, who just put those slides together so quickly and skillfully. I think she's a genius, really. But anyway, I thank you so much, Chris. And Krista Hahn is not on the screen, but she's here live, and she's just another whiz kid. So she's going to help me, with whatever I need help with, which will be just about everything. So, oh, and my gosh, my husband, Tony, who keeps me just on time, and I can't even list all the things he does that are so helpful to my life and this whole remembering experience. And my family, who you've met kind of, and my friends who just offer such encouragement for my adventures. I'm so grateful to all of you. And I'm so grateful to see you. When Janice first asked me to do this, I thought, I'm used to live presentations, but the Zoom. Anyway, she promised me I would see actual human beings on the screen. And I'm just very grateful to see each and every one of you. It really humanizes this experience of using a computer. So what am I doing with this fascination or obsession, some would call it, with names and remembering? Oh, and just an aside, we added historical detective because that's the title that seemed to capture everything that I've been doing. So there it is. So what is this? Why am I so fascinated with names? And I can't really answer that, except that I went back in time to my childhood and remembered that one of my favorite activities was going through the box of old photos that was kept in the bottom drawer of our buffet and pestering mom and dad with, who is this? Who's this? Who's this? Because they weren't identified in the photos. And I just thought it was very important to identify them. So by the time I could write, I started scribbling the names on the photos so we would remember them. And then that stayed with me apparently, because when I saw Maya Lin's Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. with, I think it's 58,000 names of soldiers who died in the Vietnam War, I thought that was revolutionary to just put the names there, not a statue of a soldier, or any of the things they used to do, but just the name. It was just very, very powerful for me. So that all just reinforced whatever was naturally in me. And even this morning or last night, I heard there's a book called My Name is George Floyd. Two journalists have written a book about the life of George Floyd, not just the death. And then in the morning paper today, there was Say Their Names memorial for the 10 victims who were killed in Buffalo, New York. So anyway, this must be a universal kind of drive. Maybe people haven't traveled all over the globe to remember these people, but it seems universal. So when I met Tony, he told me, here I am, a little girl in Iowa. I'm really close to my grandparents who come in every Friday. And anyway, they're just integral to every birthday party, everything in our life. So I really know them well. And I meet Tony and I asked him about his grandparents and he couldn't remember their names. So I was horrified, but then he told me that they had been murdered in the Holocaust. Another shock. I just couldn't put grandparent and murder together. But it was my first, I knew about the Holocaust, of course, but I never had met someone so directly affected by it. And it was a momentous discovery. And I had to know more about his grandparents. So just very, very timely, his mother sent a photo of his grandparents, of her parents, Hugo and Clemmy Mosbacher, with a little note that said, "This is for the Roots file." And so I knew she wanted to tell that story, or she'd be open to telling the story of her parents. So thus ensued many conversations with Rosie, and with, where I got to know Hugo and Clemmy. I got to know that Clemmy was a great baker and cook. And as Rosie said, did well in all the feminine arts. She played the piano, she sewed, she won contests for the best flowers on their balcony, and often did Rosie's homework because Rosie was nothing like that. So she would do her drawings and whatever else Rosie couldn't do. And then she tells me about Hugo, who is a wit. He's just very funny. And I remember her saying he could make fun of people he could tell stories about people without making fun of them or putting them down. I like that. So he had a sense of humor. He was kind. He always listened to people. He would come home from work and listen first to the maid, then his sister Frida, who lived with them, and then finally Clemmy. But he just felt it was so important that people have someone to listen to them. And so that was just great. The more I learned about them, the more I liked them. And it turns out their home in Nuremberg was a big hub of activity. It was like central headquarters for family gatherings. All the cousins and aunts and uncles would come there, warmly welcomed by Hugo and Clemmy, and all the good food was there. So people loved being at the Mosbacher home. Rosie wasn't so crazy about having to kiss all the relatives goodnight, but she still enjoyed having the cousins and aunts and uncles around. So what came from all those conversations, next slide, please, is this book, My Dear Good Rosie. We went to New York for a visit once, and she pulled out all these pictures and had their names on them and wanted to give them to us. And of course, by that time I was salivating. I definitely wanted them. And then we noticed there was a envelope over to the side of letters. They were beautiful handwriting, which you can see on the cover here. And we said, "What's that?" And she said this so casually, as if we knew. She said, "Oh, those are the letters my parents wrote to me when they were trapped in Holland during the Holocaust, 1940 to 43. And we were like, "Oh my God." And it looked like a lot of letters. It turns out there were over 200. And so I could tell I shouldn't press her, because she kind of, the only thing she would tell us is that their usual salutation was, "My dear good Rosie." And thus that became the title of the book, which is a compilation of the letters and the stories and the photographs and the documents, all related to Hugo and Clemmie's life. So we didn't get the letters on that visit to New York, but they would surface later when Rosie moved to San Francisco to the Rhoda Goldman Plaza, to an assisted living center. And she needed help at some point with going to a higher level of care. And Steve and Maureen and Tony and I were responsible for helping her move. So I got the desk. That was my assignment, the desk. And I pulled open her desk drawer, the big desk drawer, and there were the letters that had somehow made it through this chaotic move that Rosie was going through. She didn't know what to pitch. And anyway, so that was like finding gold, literally. And I knew we were going to do something with those letters. So we did. We got them translated and compiled in this book. And we told Rosie we found the letters. She said, "Don't throw them away." We said, "Are you kidding, Rosie? We are getting them translated and putting them in a book." So, and she was very pleased with that, because all along I knew she wanted her parents' story out there. And this was one way she knew it was going to get out there. So I began to, think, oh my God, we've got so much information. We've got to, in addition to the book, what else can we do? Next slide. So this is a stone. This is the first Stolpersteine I ever saw. And it was sent to us by our friends Kate and Wendy, who were traveling in Salzburg, Austria. And they were just strolling and came upon this stone. And I'm not sure they knew anything about the stones. I certainly didn't. But here was this stone for a 20-year-old woman named Rosa Lieb, who was murdered at the age of 20. I just said that, sorry. And it was laid in front of the house where she lived, in the pavement, and has what every Stolpersteine has: "Here lived Rosa Lieb," or whatever the name is, and date of birth, where she was deported, and when she was murdered. And I truly could not stop looking at this photo. I don't think Kate and Wendy ever realized, or maybe nobody ever realizes, the power of a little thing you do, like forward a photo to someone. But this really set me on the path to getting a Stolpersteine for Hugo and Clemmie. Let's see, there was a waiting list of, I contacted the Stolpersteine organization in Berlin, and Janice will have that in the, the link in the chat. And I was told it would be a 2-year wait to do a Stolpersteine in Nuremberg for Tony's grandparents. So what could we do? We just had to wait. But in the meantime, another little mini miracle happened, that we were contacted by Louisa Stigler from Nuremberg. She was a high school student who got interested in researching families who were murdered, who then had a Stolpersteine laid for them. And so she contacted us, and she'd been in touch with Gunter Demning, the man who initiated this program to lay stones in the pavement of the homes where people freely lived to honor their life. And so there are like 75,000 of these stones across Europe, and it just keeps going. I just read on their on their website that they're not laying any stones until December, after December of this year. So, but it's worth waiting. It really is worth waiting. And so I have a next slide is a video, a short video that Tony did to talk about how we laid the stone in Nuremberg. So you'll meet Louisa and other people I'll talk about. So here's the video. Do we have the sound?
Sound is not coming through right now, but I think we're okay because we can still see everything.
No.
Oh, okay.
These men are digging up a small square in the sidewalk in front of 27 Hallerstrasse in Nuremberg, Germany, where they will place a Stolpersteine, a stumbling block, a 4 by 4 inch stone with a brass plaque fitted flat into the pavement to commemorate my grandparents, Hugo and Clemmy Mosbacher, and Hugo's sister, Frieda Roderer. The stumblestones tell the casual walker that in this building, my grandparents and Frieda lived as civilized people till the Nazis forced them to a Jew house and ultimately to their murder in Auschwitz. Giving names back to the dead is a way of keeping them alive. A Stolperstein would symbolically return them to their neighborhood so many years after being torn away from their daily lives. I am Tony Bachevsky. My wife, Judy Vassos, and I, friends and passerbys, are gathered here to lay these stumbling stones.
They were very warm and welcoming. Clemmy was a great cook, so I'm sure that helped. And Hugo was, he had a very quick wit and was very kind and patient and loving. And people just were drawn to him. They just loved Clemmy and Hugo. So their life was very full and rich, and they intended to live that way in Germany for a long time. And their roots go back to the 17th century of Mosbachers. So they've just been around, they were around a long time. But they were moved from here to something called a Jew house. They put the Jews in crowded conditions. They were like little mini ghettos. And they lived, I don't know how many people were in a very small space on Purchase. And And they were going to wait for their quota number to come up in Germany. But things like that, like they moved to that small place and other things happened. And they got very afraid to stay in Nuremberg because of what the Nazis were doing to Jews. So they fled, they didn't flee, they went to Amsterdam with the idea that they would go to the United States from there. They were the plan was to meet their daughter, Tony's mother. She had gone to England. I know this is confusing, to London, because she was young enough to work. Anyway, it never happened. The reunion never happened. They had tickets to sail on a ship to New York for May 11th of 1940. And the Nazis invaded the Netherlands on May 10th, 1940. So by one day, it changed their whole lives. The Nazis were there. They took control of the Netherlands. All exit visas were canceled. And they were basically trapped in Amsterdam for 3 years.
והאלמ"ב יבחרו כנושא וימליץ על נושא בחיי חול, יומכון, חיי בכל בית ישראל, והגלות ויצחק צריך ויבחרו עומד. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולכל מי עלמיו, יתברך וישתבח, וישתבח, וישמח, וישנשא, ויסדר ויסלם ויסלל, שמי לקודשו ריב.
Today is the first time I have referred to my grandparents, Hugo and Clemmy Mosbacher, as my grandparents. Before today, I would say Hugo and Clemmy were my mother's parents. My brother Steve and I thought that grandparents were for other people. So in a sense, this is a homecoming, a wonderful occasion, sad, but remembering these 3 German Jewish citizens. Hugo, Clemmy, and Frida were German citizens who felt German. My grandfather Hugo was in World War I on the German side. They were both Jews and Germans. My mother was lucky. She was young and employable and went to England. From England to New York, where she met my father, Alexander Bachevsky, a Viennese Jew who was an atheist. My mother was troubled by this, as she came from an Orthodox Jewish family. She wrote her parents, who had fled from Nuremberg to Amsterdam, that she wanted to marry Alexander, but he was an atheist. Her father, Hugo, wrote back that as long as Alexander was a good man, Clemmy and Hugo gave their blessings to this union. I think this is so wise, so clear, and so tolerant. I am grateful to the people of Nuremberg, once a center of Nazi activity, the most virulent anti-Semitic place in Germany. They have changed and welcome the placing of these Stolpersteine. My cousin Ruth White, granddaughter of Frida Roederer, wrote, "May these stones remind us of the evil engendered by prejudice and hate, and may they serve to awaken us the compassion that views every life as a precious gift to be nurtured and protected by all."
Thank you, Tony and Chris. Next slide, please. So on the left is a picture I love of Clemmy holding Rosie. We think it's about 1919. They're in Austria visiting Clemmy's parents. Clemmy was from a town in Austria, visiting Clemmy's parents and other relatives, aunts and uncles. And they just look so happy. And I think Rosie's even holding some flowers, and something about that I really love. And to the right is Clemmy's actual stone. This was the original stone that was placed in 2015. And just as they were putting the cement to lay the stone, to secure the stone in the sidewalk, I noticed the death date was incorrect, or the death information was incorrect. It was supposed to have said Auschwitz, but it said outer Poland. So we couldn't do it. It was too late to do anything about it then. We just had to go with the flow and let them place that stone. But we did have it replaced. And Hubert Rotner, who is Gunter Demning's assistant in Nuremberg, placed another stone. And this man is so kind. His father was a Nazi during the war. And I think Hugo has been working very hard to heal that rift in humanity. So he replaced, he put the correct, they got the correct information at the Stolpersteine Center. And then Hubert sent me this plaque, the original stone, or the plaque on the stone. And I just treasure this. I have it on this little miniature easel, and look at it every day in our living room. Just love having her with us. So that mistake turned out to be really a gift to us. Next slide, please. This was another, I wouldn't call this a miracle. It was just, oh, I'm sorry. These stones. Okay. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I got ahead of myself. These stones were one thing, but to have, now we learned there was a public showing of all the names in Amsterdam's city. Well, it was in the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam, where they erected this wall of names. And I love this too. This was in 2021. And they're bricks. Each person who was murdered got a brick with their name and their date of birth and their age when they were murdered. I just found it so earthy that it was on a brick and there was so much space, because usually it's just a line of names, but here they really had their own brick. And you see these stones and pebbles at the bottom. It's the column where Hugo and Clemmy's name appear. And Jews leave stones at a grave or a memorial to say, we were here, we remember you, you're not forgotten. So that was just a thrill, because on many levels, the Dutch lost the highest percentage of their Jewish population in all of Europe during the Holocaust. So I don't think that's a well-known fact, but there's 102,163 names on this wall. So every one of them honored. And as Tony was saying in the video, the reason they're on this wall in Amsterdam is because they fled to Amsterdam after things got very heated more heated in Nuremberg. Their plan was to stay there and wait for their visas, and their plan got so interrupted, as plans often do. Hugo even said, whenever the Mosbachers make a plan, it never works out. I don't know why he believed that, but in this case, it didn't, because they were trapped in Amsterdam. And this is where they wrote the letters to Rosie while they were in Amsterdam. So anyway, I'm so glad that's there, and lots of family have gone there to pay tribute to the names of people on the wall who were murdered. It's just, I think it's just great that, like, we did the book, we did the Stolpersteine, but to have a public viewing of all the names, they'd never done this before, put all the names in on a wall. So it really impressed me. It wasn't a Stolpersteine, but it was another honoring of their life, their name, and what had happened in Amsterdam that was so horrible. So there you can see Hugo and Clemmy. Clemmy was 56 when she was murdered. And I can't really read Hugo, but I think he was 57 or 60, 63. Okay, next slide, please. So we had, it was just such a moving experience to place a stumblestone where Hugo and Clemmy had lived in Nuremberg, and, you know that it was going to be there forever for people to look at and see. And we thought we best do this for Natalie too. This is Natalie Steinhaus Bachevsky is her name. And she's Tony and Steve's paternal grandmother, their father's mother. They lived in Vienna. And I included this picture of Natalie with her family, because I had this, I don't know, very sad feeling like Natalie lost so much. And I wanted to see her with her family, with her brother and sisters and her father. She's 7 here, and she lost her mother when she was 2. So this is the family. And next to her sister Rosalie is next to the father. She's very close to Rosalie. And I just really am glad that we can have that picture of her. The reason we have it, I mean, we got it from relatives, but in Austria, they call it the Stones of Remembrance. And it's a little different than the Stolpersteine. They place the stone before the ceremony. So you come in, as opposed to with a Stolpersteine, placing the stone is part of the ceremony. And so they place the stone. They also, what's different, well, it costs more. It's bigger. There's enough room for if you wanted 4 names, but they also do this wonderful thing of researching the family history of the families and creating a booklet. And this picture and this picture, well, all of these pictures are from that booklet, which tells the stories of Natalie. And I'll just tell you a few stories that Tony remembered, that Natalie had a very dramatic way about her. She was very imaginative. And when she played with or engaged in games with Tony's father, Alexander, and his brother, Victor, she'd get down on her knees so that she was the same size as them and do the games and whatever that way. She was also very generous. She once visited her sister-in-law and they were all talking in the living room, and Natalie slipped out and went into the kitchen and took, unbeknownst to anyone, she took the measurements in the kitchen of Matilda's house or home apartment. And so she took the measurements, and then, as a complete surprise to Matilda, she had workers come and lay a new floor. So I love that story about her, just to give a flavor for her generosity and kind of playfulness, really. So so there's lots of other stories, but I'll just leave you with those. And then here's the stumble stone that was placed in Vienna in front of the house, in front of the apartment building where the Bachevskys lived. As that's the same as in Nuremberg, and the wording on the stone is the same. Here lived Natalie Bachevska. So that too was a very moving ceremony. And we were very lucky that there were a group of about 30 of us going to different locations. There were 4 people honored that day. So when we came to Natalie's place, we discovered that with us were Anna and Edward Wexberg, who now lived in that same building that Natalie and her family had lived in. So instead of having the ceremony out on the street, they invited us into the lobby, this very elegant lobby with a stairwell. And we were pretty wowed because we could imagine Tony's grandparents and Tony's grandparents and parents going up and down and coming in and out of that lobby. So that was very fortunate and beautiful. And Edward and Anna, the people that live in the building, we're still in touch with them. And they're taking good care of the stone. And there are volunteers in Vienna who come and polish the stones and put special decorations on it at certain holidays. So we stayed in touch with Edward by email while we were still in Vienna. And another surprise awaited us. Next slide, please. This is the first time Tony views the portrait of Natalie, his grandmother, which was painted in 1907 by someone who would go on to become a famous Impressionist painter, Oskar Kokoschka. And Tony knew that there had been a painting, but had no idea where it was. And the idea that we were there to honor Natalie's death, but here she appears in a gallery on the portrait, was almost too much to believe, but it was happening. So Edward had found out that Natalie's portrait was being shown at another gallery in Kokoschka's hometown, Polchard. So we got on it immediately. We wrote the gallery, and they said, "Oh, we don't have it any longer. It's on permanent loan to the Leopold Museum in Vienna, where we were." So we hightailed it down to the museum, met with the curator and the director, and this is now in the archives where Tony's looking at the portrait. So we have a million questions. The most obvious one is, where did you get this? And don't Tony and Steve have the right to it as their godchildren, grandchildren? And they were ready for us. They had done a whole, what they call a provenance report, which is a history of the painting. So they could trace it all the way back to when Tony's uncle, Victor, had it. And then on his deathbed, he gave it to the woman he married on his deathbed. And she in turn sold it to a gallery, and it got to another gallery and a gallery until it came to Polchard. And And so it took us many, many months to absorb all this, but so even though there was no chance of getting the portrait, they did say we're having a retrospective of Kokoschka the following year at the museum. And of course we were invited, couldn't come, but and it turned out that this is one of Kokoschka's earliest paintings. So they were thrilled to be able to include this in the exhibit, really. And here is the retrospective a year later. And this is my dear brother Dave and dear sister-in-law Carolyn, who just happened to be in Switzerland and went to Vienna to the retrospective and had this picture taken. They put their hand, Kokoschka had a thing for hands, so they put their hands in a similar position that Natalie had been when she sat for the portrait. So this was a thrill beyond belief that my family members were able to see this and be there. And they had the museum all to themselves because Dave had chosen Tuesday, and that's the day the museum is closed, but they said come anyway, and gave them a memorable experience. So, and then they sent us a print of this, which we have in our home now. So Natalie was getting closer and closer to our lives. She just wasn't going to stay under that stone. So then the next slide. This was a big surprise to us that there was a wall of names now erected in central Vienna in 2021. The Austrians had not really accepted their responsibility for the Holocaust. They saw themselves as victims. Hitler had invaded Austria. So this was huge for them to erect this wall and put the names of the 65,000 Viennese Jews that had been murdered. And a friend in Vienna, went and took a picture and then got a close-up of how Natalie's name appears. So, and that was, I don't know, these kind of miracles just kept growing. I guess that's what I want to say. Like, we lay the stone, but then the wall is up in Amsterdam, then the wall is up in Vienna. And what next? Well, here's what's next. Next slide, please. Another person we met at the ceremony in Vienna was Waltrid Barton, and I will never forget her because she took an interest in names and remembering right over the top. Her relative had been killed at the same in the same area where Natalie had been murdered, Mali Strosnik, near Minsk in Belarus. And I remember when I first wrote the Viennese Department of Records, and they told us that Natalie had been killed in Belarus. I thought, what? She lived in Vienna. I couldn't understand it, but through the efforts of Waltrid, and I've also asked Janice to put Timothy Snyder's book Bloodlands in the chat, because he's just an authority on what happened here. Instead of gassing, this was all bullets, execution before a pit and the bodies fall in. That's how Natalie's murder was. And so Waltrid, because she had a relative who had the same experience as Natalie, wanted to go and visit and honor the name of her relative. only there were no places to do that. There was nothing with the names of the Jews on it. So Walter dove right in and created a book with the name of the 10,000 Jews, which he could not easily do, but the Nazis kept meticulous records. So she used those transport records to record every name of a Viennese Jew that had been murdered at Malý, including Natalie. So meeting her was just a joy. And this is what's called the Massive Names Memorial, which was erected in 2019, honoring those 10,000 Jews that Waltrid had researched. So I think we got it so that you can see some of the names, David and other names. And this woman is putting a stone next to the name of the person who was murdered, who she's there to honor. So and that is right near Malý, outside of Minsk. And it was the first time there'd been any kind of memorial to these kind of forgotten people, because we just didn't know much about Malý or what happened in Belarus. And so now there's something there. There's a way to memorialize these people. And in addition to that, next slide, please. Waltrid also created the Forest of Remembrance. And this is the actual site where the 10,000 Jews from Vienna were murdered, including Natalie, and their names attached to the trees, and photographs, flowers. Waltrid said that people got very attached to these trees to remember the people that had been murdered here. And I love this. I love this remembrance, another form of remembering the names. It feels to me as if a place of destruction is becoming a place of healing, and definitely honoring the Jews that were killed. So I'm very glad that that's there too. I love all these extended remembrances of people that were murdered in the Holocaust. So I ran into a big paradox as I was preparing my presentation. I thought there are all these memorials all over, and yet atrocities continue. They don't seem to stop that. And so, we've got a war in Ukraine and all over Africa, Yemen. So I just wondered what's the use? But I came to the conclusion that this is just something human beings have to do and want to do, is remember their loved ones and honor them, honor the place where they were murdered, and tell their story, say their name, bring up all the memories you can about them if people have memories. So I'm gonna keep remembering and keep paying attention to names for the rest of my life, I'm sure. I feel it is so very important. Even today, I got an email from a friend in Iowa, And she wrote about my sister. My sister died 2 years ago. And she said, I can barely believe Linda is dead. And maybe it's because we hold her so closely in our hearts. And I thought, that's it. That's it. This was Martha. That's what I care about, that we hold these people in our hearts and our memories, and we honor them and remember them, lay stones so we don't forget them. I just will keep doing that because it's part of who I am. It comes from my heart. And if any of you do decide to lay a stone for your family, I just wish you lots of good luck and adventure and joy. It's a hard thing, but it's also a joyful, surprising, wonderful thing to do. So I encourage you to do it if you want to, because you never know what will happen when you do it. We never could have predicted all the little surprises along the way, but they happened and it was wonderful. So thank you very much for being a part of this journey. I really value getting this information out there and honoring Hugo and Clemmy and Frida. And thanks for being in these little boxes. It's really helped me. I didn't think I could do it without seeing human beings. So Janice promised me you guys would be here, and there you are.
Yep, there they are.
There they are.
We've had a few questions come up. Let me see, or at least some comments, not necessarily questions this time. Milton had asked about a definition of Stolpersteine, which I put in the chat, where it's literally that you're stumbling over them. And then he did add the comment, one of the things is that it brings it to your attention.
Yes.
It's not something you can just ignore and forget.
And also, Janice, you have to kind of bend down to read what's on the stone. So that's kind of a bow of honoring the person who is on the stone.
Let's see. Anne actually made a comment. Anne, where are you? Are you still here? Ooh, yep, Anne is still here. She says the laying of the stones is not necessarily initiated by relatives, but by organized groups that are interested in the history of Jews in their towns.
Yes,
A lot of
I know.
places in Europe are doing that. So Anne, tell us where you are so we'll know where that one is. So they research the people and then they put the stones down.
Right. I know they do that in Berlin a lot. There are many, many stones there.
Mm-hmm. And she cites from the Talmud where a person is only forgotten when his or her name is forgotten.
Thank you.
It's on the Yad Vashem page that someone should remember he lived. And as long as you are remembered, then you still exist.
You still exist, yeah. That Gunter Demning paraphrases from the Talmud, that line. So thank you, whoever brought that up.
Okay. And let's say, so I put the information about the book in there, Timothy Snyder, Bloodlands. So if anybody wants to find that book, then you can read more on that subject.
He's excellent. He's just the expert on Eastern Europe. He just knows it all. So I really recommend that book, Bloodlands, which is on the chat. And
somewhere a slight mistake crept into the URL for the Stolpersteine, and it had somewhere it has EDU, which is for educational institutions, but the correct one is Stolpersteine EU for Europe. Sorry about that. Don't know how that got in there. Oh, I actually had a question for you, because obviously we're used to researching memorials for Jews who died in the Holocaust. But the kinds of memorials you've been talking about, such as the Stolpersteine and the memorial walls, do any of the similar things exist for other groups that were persecuted by the Nazis? So the ones that I immediately thought of, homosexuals,
Yeah,
and disabled. Are there memorials like that for groups like those?
yes, that's a smaller number of names, but those also appear like in the wall in Vienna and Amsterdam. And there are probably others that I'm not familiar with, but yes, they are. There was a large group of people that the Nazis hated and wanted to get rid of,
Anybody?
but they didn't succeed.
That's true. We survived. We win.
We survived.
Leah actually thanked you for the presentation because now it's going to be the push to get her going.
Oh, good, Leah. I'm glad. Many adventures on your pursuit of this. It's a wonderful experience, just wonderful.
Now, Anne has an interesting comment because one of the things, and I thought of this a while ago, you're walking on top of the Stolpersteine.
Yeah,
Yes, they're designed for you to stumble over them and stop and read them, but physically we end up walking on top of them. So
yeah,
that's an interesting juxtaposition, commemorating the people, but then stepping on them.
yeah. A lot of people, well, some people don't like the concept of the Stolpersteine for that reason. In Munich, they wouldn't allow them to be laid on the sidewalk in front of the home. Then they finally changed their mind, but I think they put them on the side of buildings, the names of the Jews. But yeah, they thought it was a desecration, but
Leslie asked, are there special permits required to have a stone laid?
yes, you have to contact, and I can't tell you the exact person, the council person or for permission and for permission to have the stone placed on the sidewalk because it's public property. And I think they put a notice up. Oh, I know, when we were in Nuremberg for the stone, they had put a notice in the paper so that neighbors knew what was going on there, and they could also come to the ceremony. So yeah, and all that information is on that now correct website for Stolpersteiner. They'll guide you through the process. They'll ask you to wait, as I say, it's a while before they can lay a stone, but
Now, the organizations that because you gave the URLs for the two of them in your handout, when you contact them, do they help you with those permits?
they do. You can ask them questions and they'll direct you to who you need to contact, walk you through it.
Let's see. Okay, Anne is in Karlsruhe. Oh, it says stones have been laid for all the opposition members of the town council who were arrested and put in jail by the Nazis.
Oh, good.
Okay, Rochelle is asking, what is the best way to find out if the town that you want to have something done, if that town is actually doing stones?
That again, you can find out, they have a whole list of cities that they've placed the stones in. So that again would be on the website. And I'll just mention, if you just happen to have a relative in Nuremberg, that Nuremberg, just because it was the hotbed of Nazism, they just give carte blanche to anybody that wants to lay a stone. I mean, you'll never have any problem with it.
Hey, for those who can see handouts, because I realize anybody on a phone or a tablet usually cannot see a handout in the chat. Larry Froelich has uploaded steps for Stolpersteine. So you might want to download that.
Thanks, Larry, wherever you are.
Ooh,
Oh, Larry.
is this one of your relatives or friends? Aha.
Yeah.
Eve Buckner said that she has many letters written by her grandparents and photos. Now, I'm not sure if you're a genealogy person or if you're part of Judy's extended group, but she said she liked to share them.
Eve, you've told me about those before. That's very wonderful you have them.
Ooh. And Anne added another message for Karlsruhe. While they were doing some construction work at the main police station, they found deportation cards file, and there's a memorial book online. Now that URL is in the chat, so even if you're on a phone or a tablet, you should be able to see that. And it's in German, so prepare yourself. But hey, Google Translate can help you tremendously. That's right. And yeah, somebody mentioned about the stones on the walls instead. Okay, Leslie Johnson's asking, assuming the children in your family know about your work, how do you share this very important family history with them, and how do they react?
Well, that's a problem for any genealogist or family historian, to get people interested, who are not as fanatical as you are about remembering. But my family has been pretty receptive. I've created little books, and I hope they've read them. And I know that the reason Dave and Carolyn got to Vienna is that after we were in Vienna and saw Natalie's portrait and knew that there was going to be a retrospective, we told the family about our experience, and they got a gleam in their eye and thought, we're going to be in Switzerland. We'll go to see Natalie. So that was fabulous. Really. Thank you, Dave and Carolyn, again.
Okay, and Larry added a note, by the way, that the handout he uploaded is available from the Stolpersteine website. So if you are on a phone or a tablet, you don't have to worry about getting it this way. You can just go to the Stolpersteine site and download the handout about how to get the stones laid. And that is everything that's actually in chat. So now, does anybody have any additional questions or comments? Probably be best to go to the reactions and raise your hand, because we still have a lot of people. And if you're on my second page, I won't be able to see you. Oh, nobody's raising hand. Does nobody have any other questions or comments? Oh, Ruth, unmute yourself and please talk to us.
Hi, Judy. I just want to say how moving and wonderful this presentation has been. And I also want to thank you for laying the stone for my grandmother. And, like Tony, I could never say grandparents. I didn't say that I had grandparents. That wasn't real. Though I think, over the years, I have been able to claim them, I guess. Mm-hmm. And your work has been inspiring for me, and I know for others. So I just wanted to say big thanks.
Thank you, Ruth. And thank you for sending us something that Tony read when we placed the stone. That was very beautiful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ruth. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
Somebody's putting their hand
Judy
up.
gave a lot of very moving information. It's always interesting to read another, or to hear about another person's personal connection with memorials and the Holocaust. It's difficult to talk about a lot of these things. Ken Geiger is waving his hand. Yes, Ken.
Just wanted to say that Judy and Tony had did a wonderful job in writing this book and doing this presentation. Here in Los Angeles, I go to some lectures at Jewish Studies at UCLA, and I've gone to some lectures sponsored by an organization called the 1939 Club that was started by Holocaust survivors and is continued by their offspring. but I've always felt a little guilty going to these meetings and joining the organization because I'm not aware of any relatives having been killed in the Holocaust. I was wondering if anyone had any, I should add, my wife Leslie said, you know, you're Jewish, your family came from Europe and Russia. You must have had relatives that died in the Holocaust. Does anybody have any suggestions how I might look back and find any of that information?
Well, Kenny, I
Judy
would
was
say,
already waving her hand.
yeah, I mean, I got so much help from the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., who have records from deportation list, and I would start an inquiry there. And Yad Vashem in Israel. I mean, as I said in the presentation, the Nazis kept meticulous records. So there, you know, names on all these forms and deportation list, etc. So I would contact them and give them the name of your family members and see, just ask that question.
I'd also like to strongly recommend, it's one of the best books I've ever read, called The Invisible Wall. It was written by, I don't know his first initial, Michael Blumenthal. And The Invisible Wall refers to the fact, as you've mentioned, that Jews in Germany felt that they were German citizens, but there was this invisible wall that they could never pass.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Blumenthal, I think, is now president of the Jewish Museum in Berlin. He goes back several generations and talks about a relative that lived in Germany at the time and what life was like for them. And for me, it was a Jewish roots, you know, having grown up in the United States, having no idea what distant relatives went through in Europe, and their family eventually comes up to their current generation, and they flee Germany and spend the war years in the Shanghai ghetto. And he comes to the United States, I think, with about $30 in his pocket, and becomes president of the Bendix Corporation and was the Secretary of the Treasury under President Carter. But I think it's a fabulous history and gives anybody that's not familiar with it what their European relatives went through during, I think he goes back 200 or 300 years.
Yeah, you know, Kenny, I just wanted to say that when we were working on the letters, all the letters that Rosie's parents wrote to her were censored. Every one was opened and read to see if there was any secret information given out. So they had to be pretty careful about what they wrote. So we had to do a lot of research about what was really going on. I mean, the letters were full of their love for them and how much they missed her. But for the background information, they're just excellent books out there to let us know what happened. So we filled in the blanks of their inability to say that in a censored letter. I wanted to also say about the letters that when we got them translated, I sent them to a man in San Francisco, and then he would email the translation back to me. And it was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, it was like, and I shared these with Ruth and some of the other people on here, that it was really hard to read what was happening to them, even though they were censored. And then I would give them to Tony to read. And I remember each time he'd take them into the letters into his room and just say, "It's so sad. It's just so sad." And that's how I felt too, even though I wasn't as close to it. It's just so sad. It happened to his grandparents. So thank you, Kenny. Remember those stories.
Oh, I thought what was so special about your book was the list of documents that were necessary to try and get an exit visa
Mhm.
and how impossible it truly was.
Totally.
And a shout out to Tony, my Antioch roommate from 1960 or 1961.
From before I was born.
Oh my God, we're being dated. We're being outed.
I did want to add to your response to Ken about how you find out if you did have relatives who died in the Holocaust. Something to keep in mind is that there's a lot of names that were relatively common. So the first thing you actually really need to do is do your own family history. So you make sure who you know are your family members. And then start looking through all the data, go to Yad Vashem, look at the Holocaust Museum's databases. It's not that you shouldn't find other people, but one of the most important things is make sure you're remembering the right people too.
Good point, Janice.
Family members, because I didn't know I had anybody. And then when I was talking to a cousin on my grandfather's side, there was one sibling in this family that, well, nobody knew what happened to her. And well, guess what? She stayed. And we know what happened. The more research you do on your family, I've since found out I actually have 4 different families who stayed and were killed by the Nazis. But I didn't grow up knowing that. I was never told that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, if I could jump in, this is Larry Froelich, and my sister Lindy is on the call also. Might better be able to explain the relationship that my family has, at least in terms of the genealogy, with Judy and Tony, and of course also Steve and Ruth White, who are on the call. But when Judy was talking about the way in which Hugo and Clemmy just loved having this family environment in their home, and the way that falls apart. And then all of our families lost all of that and were just entirely displaced, and somehow found these relatively distant relatives, to the point where really, for starting as a child and through until Rosie was no longer there, this was our landing place in New York. And later, when I went to college in San Francisco, Tony and Judy were my Thanksgiving home, Steve as well. I remember visiting Anna White, Ruth White's parents, and she and her siblings as well. And like I say, we're not direct cousins. I can't even ever exactly remember how it is, but just to give you all a view of like what happens when the families fall apart, and then when we make new lives and find ways to move on. And Judy has just been amazing in terms of making that happen, and the presentation today showed that. So thank you, Judy. And I think we've been chatting with my sister, and I know my brother will be on board as well. We've been thinking about it, but I think now we're really inspired to try and set some stumbling stones for our grandparents on both sides. Our mother, who was from Berlin, and our father from Zagreb, which I didn't even realize Croatia is now doing it. They weren't for a long time, but they're now allowing it as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, and we have now, thanks to Judy, know where my mother's childhood home was. And we also, through some other relatives, know where my father's childhood and he was in Zagreb until he was a young adult, home was as well. So, and when you see those, you see those homes and see where your aunt, my son just loves these urban neighborhoods. And when he started looking into this neighborhood, he's like, this is where I would love to live, where my mother lived as a child in Berlin. So those when people ask, well, why do it? I think those are the kinds of things that bring it into that's what brings it to our kids and to the next generation as well. So I won't say any more, but thank you so much.
Happy. I'm so happy your kids are interested. And I want to say just another thank you to Larry and his brother Alan, that way back when I was starting all this, they showed
Lindy too, actually.
And Lindy too. They did an interview with both of their parents to get straight what had happened. And they sent me a copy of that. And I read that cover to cover and really was inspired by that. So it just reminds me what a big interrelated village this is. You can't do this alone. You just really, we're part of a piece of a bigger picture. And if you open the doors and let everybody in, it's a wonderful adventure. Thank you, Larry, again.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Oh, I see silence. Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Judy, for giving us a presentation. We really appreciate it. I'm glad that I remembered that you had done this for the Bay Area JGS, and obviously we wouldn't have heard it up here in Oregon since we were not Zooming at that time.
Right. Well, thank you, Janice, for the opportunity to do it on Zoom. I was a little nervous, but
Yeah, a little.
You did great.
thank you, whoever
You
said
did
that.
beautiful, Jackie.
Thank you very
Aw,
much, everybody. I
Thank
hope you all
you.
have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Please look for announcements from us for future presentations. And thank you again, Judy.
You're welcome. Thank you for the clappers.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Judy.
Bye. Bye.
Love ya.
Thank you.